Day political strategists Bruce Hawker and Graham Morris. Welcome to you both. Bruce Hawker, first to you. How damaging do you believe this cabinet leak is?
Well, it didn't help. Obviously, it propelled the issue over the weekend with sensational headlines. I think the nature of reporting these days, David, is something that was a problem is now a crisis. It's everything gets blown out of all proportion. But this was, embarrassing for the government, and I hope that they all bloody take a pill and don't go around leaking, because it doesn't help anybody at all when that happens, except the opposition.
Yeah, it's a pretty sensitive issue, though, isn't it, which makes this worse, and coming at the time that it's coming, when clearly the Prime Minister's in a pretty weak position.
Well, it isn't a happy time for her to have to deal with these sorts of issues. That's absolutely, the case. This issue's going to just bubble along, I think, for some time. I don't see it being sorted out immediately. However, there are some big opportunities for her in the coming weeks to get off this topic and on to things of a happier nature. We've got the royal visit coming up. We've got Obama's visit in November. There's an East Asia summit. There's an APEC summit. Lots of opportunities for her to strut her stuff in other ways than having to answer what happened in Cabinet. So I think she's got some real opportunities to get through this period, but it is a tough time. No one should pretend it's anything other than that.
Yeah, the Queen will be welcome for more than normal reasons. Graham Morris, what did you think? I mean, you've seen many cabinet leaks. They happen to all governments. What about this one? Was it a bad one?
I don't like leakers, any leakers. And, so whether it was John Howard or Malcolm Fraser or those, they had a rough idea who it was. You could bring it back to about two people. And, those two people always wondered why they didn't get promoted very well.
Is it that easy to pin who it is?
Yeah, because it's consistent, it's a particular line, it's language used. Look, Ms Gillard would have a rough idea who it is. However, and look, I'm an ex-journalist, and I went from being a journalist where you would take cabinet leaks to being inside the cabinet room. And when I made the switch, I was actually amazed how little journos actually knew, and how the leaks that I was given were sort of skewed. But let's say this leak is three-quarters right. It means people like Chris Bowen have my undying admiration, because they were right. And we've said it on this program that had the government said, look, let's take a bit of hit for 2 days, but we'll take the Nauru issue off Tony Abbott. And had they gone ahead with that, now Tony Abbott, Scott Morrison, the opposition would have absolutely nowhere to go. So those who were advocating that in Cabinet were politically astute. Those who were opposing it and those who finally got their way were dills.
But what he was apparently proposing, and what a number of the right faction ministers supported, was sending some to Nauru, but also still some to Malaysia. So a combination, if you like. Do you think that's a smart way? I mean,
I don't know.
Scott Morrison earlier wasn't willing to back it.
I don't know. All they had to do was take the Nauru option off the opposition, and they didn't. And that is just plain silly.
Bruce, do you agree with that? In terms of this idea that clearly was discussed in Cabinet at least, is probably a good one to take the political heat out of it?
Well, it might take it out for a little while, but then the government's own rhetoric, I suspect, would come back and bite it. I mean, they've made it quite clear, despite what Scott Morrison was saying to you before, that 96% of those who were processed on Nauru and found to be refugees ended up either in Australia or New Zealand. It wasn't actually anything other than a staging post for people wanting to come to Australia, and I think that's what Andrew Metcalfe was trying to say today. Look, it's all very well to say this might have worked for a period, but ultimately everybody knows that those people ended up here or in New Zealand. So it didn't really solve the problem. And I
so
think
the only reason the government would embrace it is a political reason to try and take away from the coalition any difference.
Well, yes, but as we now know, Tony Abbott would have nothing to do with it anyway. He's like one of those footballers. Can we talk about rugby again, or is it too early? That keep the ball in the maul, just keep pushing it forward, forward, forward. No intention of getting it out the back, or no intention of kicking it into touch. He just wants to keep pushing the ball forward, and that's exactly what they're doing over this issue. They don't want this problem resolved. They cry crocodile tears about it, but they don't want to see it resolved. They want to see this as a problem for the government going up to the election.
Which was reportedly, Graham, the line that Kevin Rudd argued in the Cabinet meeting that, no matter what we do, Tony Abbott will find a way to have some difference and keep some pressure on us and keep this issue alive.
Oh, look, he had to say that. And in this sort of climate, he had to support his Prime Minister, or there would have been absolute chaos in the Cabinet. But it was wrong. It was politically wrong. And I suspect in a policy sense it's wrong. And look, I've listened in the last hour, including on Sky, to all this stuff about Andrew Metcalfe. I know Andrew Metcalfe. He is one of Australia's best public servants. He's a very professional and very loyal man to the government. What did people expect him to say? They say, what do you think of this policy, Mr Metcalfe? Well, I think my minister's a dill. I think the Prime Minister's out of a league, and I think the policy is absolute crap. Of course he's not going to say that.
What, you're saying he's being political here and not wanting to defend the government?
He's being professional. And he has to go out. Hey, he has
One
to
man's
go out
political
there
is another
and
man's
support.
professional, according to you.
No. He's a professional public servant.
But are you saying he's not being
present...
frank and fearless? That's what they're meant to do?
Well, no. This is a public thing. He could be frank and fearless behind closed doors to everybody in the government. Right. But this is a public hearing, and he has to defend the government's policy, or he'd be in awful trouble.
Now, what, in terms of the Cabinet meeting that's on this afternoon, Graham, what should the PM be doing? I mean, do you go in all guns blazing and start, naming who you think it is and reading the Riot Act, or do you just note, that this has happened, you've all got to be responsible here and get on with it?
Yeah. No, you do it. You do it in with some authority, but it's brief, and you say, "Look, gang, we all saw the damage this did to us collectively. It wasn't helpful, and for goodness' sake, we all need to be able to talk to each other frankly, and walk out of here, we all saying the same thing. That she will say, look, we know we're going through difficult times. We can get out of this, but these leaks will stop us getting off our knees."
And Bruce, just finally on this issue, it doesn't help Julia Gillard in terms of whether she can hang on as leader with the pressure that she's under, does it? I mean, is this going to put even further pressure on her to go as leader?
No, I don't think this episode will. I don't think that's the problem at the moment. Look, the real issue for Julia Gillard, as I said earlier, is to get away from the question of leaks and so forth and get on to the big issues of statesmanship, which she's capable of doing. She's got some real opportunities to do that with the big events which are coming up in the not-so-distant future. I don't think the events of the weekend are going to make an appreciable difference there. If she can move on past these issues, start to build up her personal support, then she'll get into 2012 and be able to push on from there. But, it is tough times for her, and she's just got to keep steady and, as Graham said, I think, have a cool attitude to the Cabinet. No one is helped by this. Everybody has to try to save the government, and the only way you do that is by showing real solidarity. They've got to push that line, otherwise it's going to be very difficult.
All right, we're going to move on. We'll take a quick break and then look at the carbon tax. Tony Abbott's saying that business shouldn't be buying any carbon permits because when he comes in, they'll all be worthless. Stay with us.